Hello again. So, I'm working with 3 different organisations at the moment in very diverse sectors. There's an insurance company, a government body, and a charity. Yet all 3 are asking me to help with what is fundamentally the same underlying problem, which is that their digital projects are grinding to a shuddering halt under the weight of their own inertia. I'm sure you know what I mean. I'm sure you've worked on projects like that in the past that have become so big and so complicated that they've just stalled. Whether the project is delivered in-house or via a third party, it's an all too common problem. Unfortunately, these projects don't have a hope of delivering on time and almost certainly will go over budget. They are, as the saying goes, a disaster waiting to happen. Worse still, when it comes to digital projects, that actually seems to be the rule rather than the exception. As a result, the way most digital projects are managed is a mess and in desperate need of fixing. Think about how most digital projects start. Somebody has an idea within the organisation for some kind of digital service or updating an existing digital service. They approach people like us and ask us to provide an estimate of the costs and timescales for that project. What an absolute joke! I've been doing that job for 27 years and I still can't provide an accurate quote at the beginning of a project to save my life. It's just not possible. I don't believe it's a problem that I've got. I'm sure you've experienced it too. There are just too many unknowns at the start of a project. The whole thing is normally so ill-defined that how can you possibly say how much it's going to cost or how long it's going to take? It's no wonder that most projects end up running over budget and fail to meet their deadlines when the estimates are essentially pulled out of somebody's backside. Fortunately, these are problems that have been solved. All that's required is for us to collectively stop deluding ourselves that it's possible to define a digital project from the start to the finish up front before you've even begun, and instead adopt a phased approach. This topic is something I've written about recently in a post on Smashing Magazine, and you might want to check it out. In it, I propose breaking down almost any digital project into 4 phases. Those are discovery, alpha, minimal viable product, and ongoing iteration and optimization. Each phase is its own distinct project with its own budget, its own timeline, and its own deliverables. Each phase informs the next, allowing you to provide accurate quotes for each phase as it comes along. So, for example, the discovery phase will consist of things like user research, setting business objectives, identifying constraints, and various other upfront research. And once you've done all of that, suddenly it's so much easier to be able to estimate how long it would take to design, say, a prototype in your alpha phase. Equally, when you're doing the alpha and you're prototyping the digital service and you end up with a prototype of what you're going to build, it becomes trivial, doesn't it, to quote on that. The prototype becomes your functional specification that allows you to accurately cost that initial minimal viable product you're going to launch with. So instead of defining the whole project up front, you define one stage at a time, and this approach leads to more accurate timelines and budgets. It also allows for adaptation between phases rather than being locked into a set of deliverables that were defined months ago when you knew nothing. Scope creep, which is often seen as the enemy, shouldn't be seen like that, but rather as a natural part of the process that you should embrace as you learn as you move through the project. Best of all, this process that I'm outlining avoids committing to a massive expenditure for the entire project up front, when really you have very little idea how viable or how successful it's likely to be. If the discovery project goes well, then great, you move on to the next stage. But if it fails or it shows that the project isn't viable for any reason, you can drop it and you haven't lost very much. Equally, if the alpha prototype fails to perform, you can choose to go in a different direction. In other words, it's more agile, more accurate, and more manageable. Also, each phase has its own deliverables, and so that means stakeholders can see regular progression, which helps maintain project momentum, which is often one of the big problems in larger organizations. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're convinced your boss or your client will never go for this. They'll want to know how much the whole thing is going to cost up front. And that's understandable in a way. After all, our clients and our bosses are required to manage budgets, and so they need to know how much money to set aside for a project like this. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't give them your best guess at the overall price and time scale based on the little information that you have. However, we need to be upfront and frank with our stakeholders that these prices are going to be wildly inaccurate and the timelines will be massively off. And then suggest that we actually take it in a series of small steps, and we begin by doing a discovery phase that will help us then more accurately price the subsequent stages after that. Look, I'm not claiming this is an easy sell. After all, that's why I've been hired by my current 3 clients. I'm brought in to set up these kinds of systems and make sure that they happen. However, it is possible and the benefits are enormous. It also works on any scale project, and whether you're an in-house team or an agency or even a freelancer. For example, it's the basic process I use for running any website build that I'm responsible for, even if it's a small project. My discovery phase might be nothing more than a single workshop, and my alpha just a few grayscale wireframed pages. The principle is splitting the project into smaller steps and making each step a separate engagement, and that still stands no matter the size of the project. Clients also like it because it allows them to engage a new supplier for a much smaller project where they can test out the relationship rather than having to commit to spending a significant amount of money with somebody that they don't really know yet. My advice is give it a go, see for yourself. Have a read through my Smashing Magazine post, and if you still need help implementing the approach or convincing your colleagues, you know where to find me.